1. The Blood Forest. A group of hikers enters a dense forest rumored to have been the site of ancient sacrifices. They laugh off local legends, but as they go deeper, they notice the trees bleeding when scratched, and the forest floor feels alive beneath their feet. One by one, they begin to hear their own voices begging for help in the distance. By the time they realize the forest feeds on their fear, it's too late. They become part of the landscape, their faces etched into the bark of the trees. 2. The Eternal Guest. Mark checks into a quaint but isolated bed and breakfast on a stormy night. The hostess is overly warm, and the other guests seem unnervingly cheerful, but he brushes it off. As he tries to leave the next morning, the door won't open, and the hostess simply smiles, saying, "You can't leave until your room is taken." Slowly, Mark realizes every guest has been there for years, each trapped until they lure someone else to take their place. 3. The Silent Town. While driving through a rural area, a couple stumbles upon a seemingly abandoned town. They decide to explore, finding perfectly preserved homes, fresh food on tables, and signs of life, but no people. As night falls, they hear whispers, footsteps, and children laughing. They discover that the town's residents are there but invisible, cursed to remain unseen while hunting new victims to share their fate. 4. The Deep Well. On a family farm, Clara discovers an old well hidden behind overgrown bushes. When she peers inside, a voice calls her name, begging for help. She becomes obsessed with the well, hearing different voices and seeing faces in the water. Her family tries to intervene, but the well begins pulling them in one by one until Clara realizes it's not water, but a portal to something hungry and endless below. 5. The Dark Web Cult. Jake stumbles across a mysterious dark web forum that promises true enlightenment through secret rituals. At first, he thinks it's a hoax, but the instructions he follows seem to grant him strange powers until he starts seeing shadowy figures watching him everywhere he goes. The forum users reveal that Jake's soul was offered as part of a deal for the rituals, and the shadows are coming to collect. 6. The Forgotten Room. After moving into a historic mansion, Anna notices a locked door that doesn't appear on the floor plans. Curious, she eventually finds the key and steps inside, discovering a perfectly preserved nursery filled with dusty toys and a crib. That night, the sound of a baby crying fills the house, and the toys begin appearing in other rooms. The next morning, Anna realizes she can't find her way out of the house. It's grown larger, and the nursery is now at its center, waiting for her to stay forever. 7. The Possessed Painting. At an estate auction, a couple buys an eerie painting of a woman with hollow eyes, thinking it will be a quirky conversation piece. But each night, the painting changes. The woman moves closer to the frame's edge, her eyes growing more lifelike. By the time they realize the woman is trying to escape the painting, one of them is already missing, their likeness now trapped in her place. 8. The Collector. A small-town antique shop is infamous for its unique inventory, but the shopkeeper is rarely seen. One day, a woman browsing the store notices a collection of eerie mannequins, each incredibly lifelike, wearing the clothes of missing locales. She discovers that the shopkeeper is a reclusive artist who preserves people in wax, but as she tries to leave, she realizes she's been locked in and the last mannequin is being prepared for her. 9. The Midnight Broadcast. A mysterious radio broadcast starts airing at midnight, filled with chilling whispers, static, and cries for help. A curious journalist decides to track its source, following coordinates to an abandoned asylum. There, she finds old equipment still broadcasting, but when she approaches it, she hears her own voice begging for help on the next broadcast. 10. The Shadow Watcher. Lucas begins noticing a shadowy figure standing at the edge of his vision, always there, but never moving closer. He dismisses it as a trick of the light, but the figure starts appearing in his dreams, and his reflection in mirrors begins mimicking the shadow's posture. One night, The shadow steps out from the mirrors and replaces him entirely, leaving Lucas trapped in the void as a silent observer. Alice inherits a decrepit Victorian mansion on Harrow Hill, an inheritance shrouded in mystery. As she and her partner Ben arrive, the house's eerie atmosphere becomes undeniable, with whispers, shifting shadows, and ominous symbols carved into the walls. The mansion's caretaker, an enigmatic old man, warns them of a sinister presence, but reveals little. As the days pass, Ben begins to act strangely, seemingly possessed by an ancient entity bound to the house through blood rituals performed by its original owner. Alice uncovers the mansion's grim history, a cult's attempt to summon and control a malevolent force called the Watcher. The entity manipulates Alice's mind, preying on her fears and guilt, while the caretaker's allegiance to the entity is revealed in a shocking betrayal. Desperate to end the terror, Alice delves into the attic's secrets, discovering that her family's lineage ties her fate to the house. In a final act of defiance, Alice confronts the entity in a climactic ritual, sacrificing herself to burn the mansion and trap the entity forever, or so it seems. As the ashes settle, whispers of the curse persist, waiting for its next victim. 1. The Forgotten Village. A group of friends stumbles upon a map to an unmarked village deep in the woods, rumored to have been cursed after its inhabitants mysteriously vanished. When they arrive, they find abandoned homes filled with untouched meals and eerie, childlike laughter echoing in the air. As night falls, shadowy figures emerge, whispering their names and forcing them to relive their darkest memories. Trapped in the village with no way out, they realize they're not just visitors, they're replacements for the souls that were lost. 2. The Mirror's Whisper. Emma discovers an antique mirror at a flea market and brings it home, charmed by its intricate frame. But the reflection begins to show things that shouldn't be there, her smiling when she's not, shadows creeping closer when she's alone. Each night, the reflection grows more alive, and Emma realizes it's trying to take her place. In a desperate attempt to destroy it, she smashes the mirror, but instead of shattering, it pulls her inside, leaving her trapped in a dark void while her reflection walks free in her world. 3. The Midnight Train. A weary traveler boards a late-night train, noticing only a handful of silent passengers. As the train hurtles forward, the windows show not the expected countryside, but visions of horrifying events, wars, plagues, and massacres. When he tries to leave, he discovers the train has no conductor, and its stops lead only to desolate landscapes. The other passengers reveal themselves as the souls of the damned, and he realizes too late that he boarded not a train, but his final journey to the afterlife. 4. The Missing Child. When Sarah's son, Danny, vanishes during a camping trip, she spends months searching the woods. One night, she hears his voice calling her from the trees and follows it, finding him unharmed but eerily different. His smile is too wide, his movements too stiff, and he speaks of a man in the shadows who took care of him. As they return home, Sarah begins noticing subtle changes in herself. Too, her shadow moves independently, and her reflection doesn't follow her movements. She realizes too late that Danny didn't come back alone. The Red Lantern. Every night, a red lantern glows faintly in the old lighthouse on the cliff, though it's been abandoned for decades. When Sam, a skeptical journalist, decides to investigate, he finds the keeper's log describing a curse that traps the souls of sailors who ignored the warning light. As the fog rolls in, Sam hears phantom ship horns and screams, realizing the lantern wasn't a warning, it was a lure, and now his soul is bound to the lighthouse forever. The Drowned Village. After a reservoir is drained during a drought, a submerged village reappears, and tourists flock to see the ruins. But those who touch the water begin hearing whispers in their sleep, pleading for them to come back. As more people disappear into the night, a diver discovers that the townsfolk were sacrificed to a creature in the lake, and their restless spirits are calling for replacements. The Black Mask. An ancient mask discovered in a hidden temple is rumored to grant eternal life, but at a terrible cost. When historian Evelyn puts it on, she feels an incredible surge of power, but her body begins deteriorating as her soul is bound to the mask. She learns too late that the mask feeds on its wearer, and removing it only transfers the curse to the next unfortunate soul. The Whispering Tunnel. A long abandoned railway tunnel becomes the center of urban legends when hikers report hearing whispers and footsteps inside. A thrill-seeking group ventures in, only to discover the spirits of workers who were buried alive during a collapse. The whispers grow louder, the spirits closer, and the group realizes they can never leave. Their souls are now trapped in the tunnel's endless darkness. The Cursed Playground. A forgotten playground sits on the outskirts of a small town, overgrown and rusted. Children who play there return with strange behaviors, speaking to invisible friends and claiming they've met the others. When a desperate parent investigates, they unearth bones beneath the swings and see shadowy figures lurking in the distance. The parent realizes too late that the playground was a ritual site, and the others are taking their child. The Midnight Caller. Sarah begins receiving phone calls every night at midnight, hearing only static and faint breathing. The calls escalate, and she starts hearing a distorted version of her own voice warning her to get out. She eventually discovers that the calls are coming from her future self, trapped in a ghostly limo, trying to prevent her from dying in the house. The Empty Grave. After visiting his mother's grave on the anniversary of her death, David notices her tombstone is cracked and the soil is disturbed. He digs in panic, only to find her coffin empty and claw marks on the lid. That night, he hears her voice calling from the woods, but when he approaches, he finds a rotting figure wearing her face, waiting to take him to the grave she escaped. The Frozen Hotel. During a snowstorm, a traveling couple checks into a remote mountain lodge with no other guests. The staff is unnervingly polite, but something feels off. As the storm worsens, they realize the staff members are frozen corpses, animated by the cold, and the guests are never allowed to leave once they check in. The Haunting Broadcast. A late-night TV show airs once a month, promising viewers a glimpse into the supernatural. Viewers report terrifying nightmares afterward and strange knocks on their windows. When a journalist investigates, she learns the show's host made a deal with a demon. Every viewer sacrifices a piece of their soul to feed the entity. The more people watch, the stronger it becomes, and now it wants her as its new host. The Skin Takers. In a small town, people begin disappearing, only for new residents to arrive days later wearing unnervingly familiar faces. A hunter discovers strange, skinned corpses in the woods and realizes the new residents are creatures that wear human skin as disguises. As paranoia spreads, he can't tell who's real anymore until he looks in the mirror and sees his own hollowed-out eyes.